Got the room plastered in a day. The ceiling's drying nicely, so is the back wall. Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to plaster a room. So we're going to go through the order. That's the main essential part of plastering. It's getting everything in the right order and doing it in a way that makes sense, and is also the most useful in terms of getting the most done in a day. So I'm just going to finish scrimming up. In the same day I would usually use the scrim tape. If you scrim the day before skimming, especially on the ceilings, you'll find that most of it will fall down. So on the same day I'm plastering, I'll scrim up. I've PVA'd all the walls beforehand, and I've literally just fixed the corner beads. I usually try and do that the day before on prep, but if you're coming on a job, it's your first day, you really want to put your beads on, whack your scrim tape on. You know, that takes a bit of time in itself. So before you've even plastered, you've got work to do. But I'm just going to quickly talk you through how we're going to do it. When you're plastering a wall, when you're plastering a room, the first place you start is the ceiling. Always start with the ceiling and work your way down. So if you're a beginner, you do one hit on the ceiling, and then you potentially do one wall, and then work your way around until you've got all the walls and the ceilings done. So that'd be 5 hits. If you're brand new to plastering, that's what I recommend. Just work your way through, but always start in the ceiling. And the reason is because it's a lot easier to see your edges from this level, but when you're working up to the ceiling, it's a bit harder to find out where your end point is. I always find it's better to work your ceilings first, and then when you're butting up to the join from the wall, it's just a lot easier to make sure that line is completely straight and there's no gaps, more essentially. And the other reason is if you do the ceilings last, you'll just find you'll get all the plaster falling onto your finished work, and it just don't look very nice. It won't affect your finish, but it just doesn't look very good. When you're scraping off, it leaves remnants of what was there before. So ceilings first. If you're a bit further down the line, what I do is ceiling one hit and then opposite walls. So say you do one wall opposite end of the room, 2 walls together, and then your 2 walls on the third hit. That'd be 3 hits. 1 ceiling, 2 opposite walls. And that means you're not dealing with wet angles. Unfortunately, when you start getting into realm, I'm going to do this room in a day just because I ain't got much time. It's my own house and I want to get it done. I've had enough. Last room in the house, it's time to finish it. So what I'm going to do is ceiling with this wall. We can't avoid wet angles. Basically, my point is through this video, I'm going to show you how to deal with wet angles, but also just show you not to be that scared of them. You just get used to them after time. It just takes practice. At the beginning it is tricky, but you'll find within time, I think wet angles are a bit easier to deal with than naturally dry angles now. So that's the talk. I'm going to finish scrimming up. So like I said, walk into your room, put your scrim tape where needed, and try and essentially PVA before, the day before, even if it's the evening before you start the job, just because it'll take a while for it to dry. You don't really want to be waiting for the PVA to dry when you want to get in and plaster a room. So I'm going to finish scrim taping, and what I'm going to do is going to walk you through the process and how I plaster a room. I'm going to do it in a day, but like I said, if you're brand new, start at the ceilings, work your way around. So let's do it. Cool. Okay, so we're starting on the ceiling. Like I said in the video previously, always start on the ceilings when you start in a room. Whether you're brand new and you're going to start with the ceiling and only do the ceiling, that's absolutely fine, and then do your walls after in a separate hit. That's cool, however you want to do it. But basically, you always want to start the ceilings, and you always work from your edges, work into the center. It just means it's a lot easier in terms of workflow. So you start in the top left hand side of the ceiling and you follow your way around. So it works all the way around, working from the edges. And what I'm going to do is work towards the area that I'm also going to plaster. So I'm coming towards the wall, I'm going to do it at the same time. What we really want to do is do the ceiling and the top half of the wall whilst we're in the same spot. This just saves time and makes it a lot more efficient when it comes to plastering. So as you can see, I'm always working from the edges and try and go both ways. Now I'm going to trowel it the other way. It just means the plaster is going to be a lot flatter when we are plastering the ceiling. But like I said, whilst I'm on this spot, what I'm going to do now is work from the top left hand side of the wall and follow it around. We're always working left to right in general. It just means if you are right handed, it's just easier in terms of plastering. So like I said, as I'm coming round now, I'm dropping down and starting a wall below it. That means we're getting 2 areas done. So this is how I'm going to do the room to start with. The ceiling, 1 wall, and then next to it I'm going to do 3 walls. I'm going to go through all that in this video, so don't worry. But again, when you're doing the ceiling, work from your edges and aim for the centre. You can see now that most of the ceiling is done. All I've got to do now is follow from the edge that I'm at now and bring it right to the centre and meet it in the middle. Obviously, if it's a bigger ceiling, you won't be able to do it, but most times you can do it with the big sweep. I've sped it up a bit now, but as you can see, sweeping now, a long sweep to make sure that I'm meeting to the centre of the room. And that way, there's no joins. It's going to be a lot easier to plaster, and it's going to be a lot easier to get a nicer, flatter ceiling. So what I'm doing is applying the plaster, big, long sweeps now, and then that way, we're just going to get it done a lot neater. And as I'm doing the ceiling, I'm also dropping down, doing the walls. Okay, so the ceiling's on, top of the wall's on. This bit's fairly simple now. Like I said, you're paying attention to your edges at the top. Just make sure you can get them as clean as possible from the beginning. So this bit is fairly simple. Just whacking the plaster on. The thing is, we want to be focusing on speed really, because if you want to get this done in a day, then really speed is the factor, but you really want to keep your control as well. Make sure your wall is flat as possible from the beginning. In case it does turn, you know, plaster, if it sets randomly, or if you've got a bit of a hotter temperature, you want to make sure it's not too bad before it comes flattening. So starting at your sides, coming out. Keeping that control throughout really. Now when I'm coming up, I come as high as I can and try and flatten the top sections as well when I'm applying the plaster. So, just add a bit more in there. Now, the walls are the fastest part, you can just throw it on. Ceilings generally take a bit more time, so what I usually do is have 1 ceiling, 1 wall, and then I'll tackle the 3 walls in 1 hit. So I'm just going to finish putting this on, then we're going to go into detail how to start flattening and then applying the second coat. A fair bit of gear left. So now, especially because it's a smaller hit, it's a good idea to whack some reveals on. So I'm going to probably whack that one, do the opposites on the reveals, and then focus on the head in the next set. Just because this is the smallest set, it'd be good to reduce it and get rid of some of the fiddly bits. So I'm going to use some of that plaster on some of these reveals and we'll craft them. I'm going to clean the buckets out, get rid of the plaster we've got remaining, and then I'm going to get another batch on, start again. But in between that, when I've cleaned the buckets, I'm going to quickly flatten what I've done. Always flatten your first coat if you're going to do bigger hits. I didn't used to believe in that, but to be honest, if you're going to do 2 separate mixes, any of these ripples or any of these lines that are showing now will set and they might show through on your second coat. The problem is if these set before you've had a chance to apply your second coat, you won't be able to get to them because they're beneath the second coat itself. So no matter how much troweling you do, these lumps will shine through. And sometimes the biggest problems people think, why am I having problems flattening the second coat? It's not that, you've just left this to dry. The second coat's gone on top and this is what's shining through. So you can polish all your second coat as much as you want. You will not get to this. So clean up, I'll flatten this ceiling and wall quickly and then get another mix on, start again. So we're doing the same way we started and applied it. Just following around the room and flatten it the exact way you did, because otherwise plaster's going to set at different times if you mess with the routine. So you want to stick to how you applied it, to how you want to flatten it. What I will say is when you're flattening, pay attention to the wet edge. So make sure you get it as clear as possible. You want to get rid of any snorts, any fat lumps you want to get off. You just want to flatten it. Take your time with the wet angle, because I've seen too many people rely on the corner trowel. The problem is if the first coat's set, again it's the same problem as this. If the first coat is set and you're applying the second coat of plaster, you're going to struggle to get them bumps out. So pay particular attention to that wet angle and try and get it right from the beginning. This does take a lot of practice, but again, like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So we want to get it as flat as possible, really. Not perfect, but you want to get rid of any lumps. So I'm just going to work in the top, follow across, and then flatten the bottom half. As soon as I've done that, I'm getting another mix of plaster on, ready to go again. So for now, just focus on getting that wet angle kind of good at the beginning. So now we're going to focus on the same routine. I've gone around the room, come back to the point where we started at the beginning. But what I'm going to say is when we're applying the plaster, we've got two things to show off. I'm applying the long strokes. I'm putting a thinner coat on. The second coat of plaster is always slightly thinner than the first. So it's about half the amount actually, if you want to be sure. But still make sure you've got a decent coverage. But I'm also taking particular care around that wet angle. You don't want to get it covered with load of clumpy plaster. I know plastering wet angles is hard, but one thing I will say when you are learning to do wet angles is learn to apply it a bit better at the beginning. Just take your time. When you come into the wet side, just come in slowly, make sure you apply it in a way that's not overrun, and make sure you try and keep your edges as clean as you can from the beginning. Now, something's just happened here. I've just got a load of plaster in my beard, you'll see now. Got it in the beard. Look at that. Yay, so I've got most of the plaster on. I just thought I'd quickly mention, most people think that you need a wet mix on your second coat. I wrote a bit of an article about this called the wet mix paradox. Basically, I think if you get it too wet, especially on ceilings, you'll just find you're spending most of your time trying to get it on, you'll drop a lot of it. I do add a tiny bit more water, but don't make it wet to the point where it's sloppy, because it's just harder to put on, and you find you won't put as much plaster on either, which means the top coat has got a bigger chance of shining through. You still need a substantial amount on your second coat of plaster. So, I'm coming to an end here. Just got the last bit to apply. And then I'm going to clean up again. And then we're just going to continue with flatten. So I'm going to clean up, get my tools out of the way, get the buckets out, and then keep myself a nice clean space. So I just thought I'd mention that on the mix front. Don't make your second coat too wet or too runny. Just makes harder work for yourself. Wet angles. If you get this right, you might not even use a corner trowel. I'll be honest, I don't use them, but I will show you in this video how to do it. But let me give you a close-up snap. And this is the first flattening, this is just closing in, but let me just show you close up how we need to get them corners right. You can see they're quite bubbly there. You want to be getting in tight, pulling them out. And again, back down, corner your trowel on the edge line, pull down. And you want to start getting that closed in. That's what we're dealing with now. That's where we want to be going. You just take your time. The better you do this now, the easier it's going to be in general when it comes to using your corner trowels or anything like that. You want to be pulling them out now. Plaster going wrong. Everything's been flattened, no problems. looks grand. Then we come to the reveal, and it's pulling for whatever reason. Strange. That was just plasterboarded as well. So it just shows some of the problems that you can encounter, you know, and there's nothing you've done wrong. This just happens in plastering sometimes. It's why it can be a hard game, because sometimes the plaster just reacts differently to different areas. You know, you can't always get it. So what I'm going to do, weigh it in, trial it out, but it just shows that even someone who's been doing it a long time, these problems still happen. So just expect a few challenges every now and again, and just remember water is your friend. Okay, if you do decide to use a corner trowel, then this is the one I recommend. This is a Ragni 110 degree angle trowel. It is amazing. I'm actually going to do a video in the future comparing all the best corner trowels together, and I'm going to find out which one is the best one. But at this moment in time, this is the one I'd go for. It's a brilliant trowel to use, and it really does clean your edges up beautifully. So let's go into it and see how it works. The corners in. Dig that in tight. It doesn't leave any marks, and it really fills in the centres. And then all you do is you trowel it out and you're good to go. It's a brilliant tool. Very good for internal corners. So now we're coming to the final parts of plastering. I'm just going to do the wet trowel on this wall. The idea is simple. Get your water brush. You literally just go across. You just trowel the wall. I'm using Manila Black Addiction Flex. It's a brilliant trowel. Didn't like it at the beginning, now I love it. And then this is coming to the end of the set. This is it. Got one more trowel afterwards, which is a dry trowel. And that's this wall and ceiling done. Okay, so that's the first half of the room done. So we went through wet trowels, wet angles, troweling, basic troweling techniques. The next half, this is where we're going to do the majority of the room. We've got 3 walls to do now, which is a bigger area to plaster. So we're going to go into how to plaster effectively. So we're going to talk about how to get your walls flat when you're applying a plaster. And we're just going to go into techniques on how to work on window walls, and just basic ideas on how to start dealing with the rest of the room. So that's coming up next, and I just thought I'd ask you one quick question. I asked this to my Plastering Facebook group, Plastering For Beginners Facebook group, sorry. What is the biggest problem you have with plastering? I asked this for one of 2 reasons. Basically, if you give me your biggest problems, and I can start honing in my videos around what you struggle with the most. So if you would, just leave your biggest problems with plastering in the comments below this video. Let us know what you really struggle with, whether it's troweling, whether it's putting a plaster on the wall, whether it's dealing with corners, plastering ceilings, whatever it is, let me know what your comments are below this video. Even if you answered in our Facebook group, put it in again, and what I'm going to do is collect all the answers and then start making more videos around your biggest problems. So if you want to leave a comment, even leave a comment on what you think about the video so far, that'd be great. And then we're going to carry on with the rest of this room. So keep watching. We've got a lot of information coming up. Stay tuned, and remember to like and subscribe to our channels. Cheers. Final part, it's the second hit. I've got the side wall, window wall on, and I've got the tops on. Basically, it's just the same process. All we're working on is applying the plaster. And the only way you're going to get to the point where you can do a room in the day, I mean this is only a small room to be fair, it's not massive, is if you figure out your wet angles, which is what we went through, and you learn to apply the plaster, you know, a bit faster basically. So I've done the tops, still following the routine of left to right, so start on the left side, come along the tops, now I'm just going to work across the bottoms. So you just take your plaster, and it's the exact same process, starting from the side, putting it on, and again just paying attention to your internal corners. So this time we're going to have 3 wet angles, one there and one there. We're just constantly making sure we don't put too much plaster in the corners and just create problems for ourselves. The longer you spend flattening, the more time you lose. Basically we want to do all the work when we're applying the plaster. So we just want to get the plaster as flat as possible basically. Not too sloppy the mix, nice amount. Just gliding up. Take the plaster, come up, come back down, up. Oh, big stone. And all we're doing is just focusing on that motion. Up, down, back up. And that's the fundamentals of plastering really, just make sure you're getting it applied in a way that's as flat as you can at the beginning, and it just saves you time. A lot of stones. So the walls have been PVA'd, and that's the prep we've done, that's all we've done. Put screen tape in the internal corners, and we're just good to go. Basically I find this part of plastering easier than the ceilings, the reveals and the sides. So again, the process is simple, we're just applying the plaster, just following exactly what we did before. So all the plaster is on the walls. That is your biggest battle. It's getting it on and getting it in a way where it's not setting too fast. And people ask, how do you get used to doing big hits? And unfortunately it's just pressure. It's just having the need to do more. Basically you won't push harder in plastering until you push yourself. And you'll only learn to do as many walls as you can take until you really push yourself. And it's not a nice feeling sometimes because the plaster can set, you know, it can leave you in a bit of trouble, and it's never nice when the plaster turns and you're chasing your tail. But it's probably the only way you learn to plaster bigger areas is by pushing yourself and throwing yourself out there. So that's it really. That's the big question asked, how do you plaster more? It's just by forcing yourself to do more than what you would usually. And it's only that stress that'll make you get there. So that's just a tip for you there. Every room you'll have a window wall, or in theory, unless you're in prison. So I'm just going to give you a little tip on how to deal with windows. When you're working to the bead, I always work up as well as working across. And this means that your bead and everything in between is going to get filled. When you run up, you can see exactly what needs filling. And basically what we're trying to do is bring this parallel to the bead. So by coming both ways, you're allowing to fill the whole sections. So don't just trowel left to right, don't just do horizontals, make sure you do your uprights. I mean, we're only flattening at the moment, we're just flattening the first coat, but we need to make sure that we're getting this whole area filled and everything in between, otherwise you'll get dips, or even the other way, you'll get humps. By running upwards, you're going to flatten that, and it'll make sure that that runs parallel in a nice straight line. There's nothing worse than a hump or a dip in the middle of a reveal. It don't look nice, and it's definitely not nice to the eye. So run up as well as left to right. Now we've got a ceiling to work to. The other thing when you're doing the room, you've got to realise that your edges are crucial. That's where the first person anyone does, you walk into the room, is look into the corner. It's instinct. You'll look into the corner of the room, that's where your eyes will go, so they need to be banged on. So, when we are doing corners, we need to make sure that we do the tops. You follow the trowel along the line once, one way, horizontally, and you come down vertically. What we aim, you see these snorts, want to push them in tight and bring them down. We will eventually scrape the excess plaster at the top, but our aim is to make sure them edges are tight. So you go down, you also come horizontally like we said, focusing on that internal again, keeping them as clean as possible. But our job is to make sure your angles to your freshly plastered ceiling are bang on. You don't want to be ruining your ceiling because you were lazy and you didn't clean up. So that's another tip. This is the first flattener of our second coat. Now we're just going to work through the process. There's nothing different now to the wall as to what we did before. I'm going to speed things up a bit. This video has been pretty long anyway. But we've dealt with wet angles, we've dealt with application, we've dealt with dealing with 3 walls at a time, and now it's just a simple case of flattening, smoothing, and then getting it done. the final trowel has got me from this bad boy, the Rafina Plasiflex, the best finishing trowel on the market. If you stayed this long, that's the secret weapon. Dry trowel with this little bad boy makes the trowel. Job done. Let's have a quick look. Got the room plastered in a day. The ceiling's drying nicely. So's the back wall. And it's all coming together. So, that's it. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel. Really appreciate it. Means the world to me. And yeah, please like this video and leave any comments below. And basically, let us know what you feel about it. If you want to learn a full process of plastering, how you plaster a wall from start to finish, sign up to our free welcome course using the link below this video. We'll teach you how to mix plaster, we'll teach you how to get it on the wall, and we'll show you basic tips on how you can start plastering for yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.